You can be the good person everyone calls when something breaks. You can solve really difficult technical problem. You can write good code. You can help your teammates. And still, someone else gets the opportunity you were looking for. I have seen this happen. And maybe you have experienced it yourself. You look at someone getting the opportunity. You look at someone getting promoted, getting more responsibility, getting invited to important conversation. And you think, I am doing work too. What am I missing? For a long time, I thought answer was very simple. Work harder, become technically better, learn another technology. And yes, those things matters. But after spending many years in software engineering, I have come to realize that there is another skill that becomes more important as you grow. And most engineers aren't really taught this skill. And it is the ability to make value of your work understood. And no, I'm not talking about bragging. Actually, this has almost nothing to do with bragging. Imagine there are two engineers in the same team. Let's call them engineer A and engineer B. Engineer A is really good technically. He is the person people go to when something complicated breaks. He spends hours debugging the thing. He solves difficult problems. He helps people. But when someone asks what he has been working on, he usually says, "Oh, just working on few things. Fixed some issues. The deployment problem is sorted now." And then he goes back to work. Engineer B is also good technically, but when something gets done, he explains it little differently. Instead of saying I fixed the deployment issue, he might say we were having recurring deployment failure. So I looked into the underlying cost and fixed it. That should reduce the failed release we have been seeing and make deployment predictable for the team. Notice something? Engineer B didn't brag. He didn't say, look how amazing I am. He didn't take the credit for entire team. He simply explained what happened and why it matters. Now imagine 6 months go by. A bigger project comes up. A leadership opportunity opens. Someone asks, who would we put on this? Which engineer is easy to remember? That's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the difference isn't that one person is dramatically better than the other. Sometimes the one person contribution is something easier to see. I think the engineer have problem here. We are trying to solve the problem. We spend years learning framework, language, technical details, databases, cloud, distributed systems. We learn how to build the things, but nobody really teaches us how to explain the value of the thing that we have built. So we naturally describe our work in technical terms. I change this API. I refactor this component. I fix the pipeline. I increase the test coverage. And again, there is nothing wrong with these statements. But there is another question hiding behind them. So what changed? That's the question I want you to start asking. Whenever I finish something meaningful now, I try to step back and ask, what is the difference because this work exists? Maybe something is faster. Maybe something is more reliable now. Maybe a team no longer need to do something manually. Maybe a customer doesn't experience the problem anymore. Maybe another developer can do something in 10 minutes now instead of hours. Maybe you prevented a problem that might have happened 6 months from now on. That is where the interesting part of the work is. Not necessarily in the code, but in what the code changed. Here is the real kind of example. Imagine you have spent a week fixing a recurring problem, and at the end of the week, you tell your manager, I fixed the issue. Okay, now imagine instead you say this. The issue had been coming back several times. So rather than just fixing the latest failure, I traced it back to underlying issue. I fixed that issue and added a safeguard. So we would stop seeing the same problem repeatedly. That is very different conversation. You are showing that you just didn't close a ticket. You understood the problem. You looked for the root cause. You thought about the future. That's what starts to look like a senior engineering. And I think that is where the career growth changes. Early in your career, you are mostly trying to prove I can do this. Can I build the future? Can I fix the bug? Can I understand technology? Can I deliver? But as you become more experienced, the question changes. It is less, can I do this task? And more, can you figure out what actually needs to be done? Can you identify the real problem? Can you decide between several imperfect solutions? Can you understand the trade-offs? Can you decide between the trade-offs instead of constantly reacting to them? Can you make other engineers more effective? Can you take the responsibility where there is no obvious answer available? That is completely different level of engineering, and there is something else that comes with it. You need to be able to explain your decision. Think about an architectural problem. Suppose your team has a difficult problem. You have three possible solutions. One is quick, one is elegant but would require huge architectural change, and another is practical middle ground. You choose the third one. 6 months later, someone look at your code and see the implementation. They may not know why you choose it, but imagine you can explain. We consider three approaches, but I went with this one because it solves immediate customer problem while avoiding large existing architectural change. It wasn't the most elegant solution, but given the architectural constraint, I thought this is the safest trade-off. That is valuable because you are not just showing what you have built, you are showing how you think. And as you become more senior, I think that's increasingly what people are paying attention to. Now add AI into the picture, and this is where the things get really interesting because we are entering the world where AI can produce lot of output that engineers traditionally produce themselves. AI can write code, it can write test, it can generate documentation, it can analyze logs, it can suggest solutions, it can even help us to explore architectural options. So if AI can make producing output much easier, what's become more valuable? I don't think it is typing faster. I think it is the judgment, knowing what problem you are actually trying to solve, knowing which solution makes sense in your environment, understanding the trade offs, recognizing what information you are missing, recognizing when AI generated answer looks good but it's actually wrong for your system. Understand the customer, understand your team, understand the consequence of a decision. AI can give you the answer, but someone still needs to decide. Should we actually do this? And I think that person is going to be increasingly more valuable. So don't build your career around being the person who knows most of the tools. This is something I have started thinking about. You can spend your entire career collecting the technologies. Angular, .NET, Azure, Kubernetes, Cloud, Distributed System, whatever the next technology happens to be. And learning these things are important. But eventually, I would rather people describe me differently. Not he knows a lot of technologies, but if there is some complicated engineering problem, let's ask him. That is a very different reputation. Maybe you are the person who simplifies the complicated thing. Maybe you are the person who simplifies complicated systems. Maybe you are the person who can unblock the teams. Maybe you are the person who can be trusted during the production incident. Maybe you are the person who can take something technically complicated and explain it very easily. Maybe you are the person who consistently find a way to automate the repetitive work. What do you want people to come to you for? I think that is much more interesting career question. Here is something you can actually do this week. Don't start with a big career plan. Just try this. At the end of this week, just think of one thing you are really proud of. Not the thing that took most time, the thing that actually made the difference. And write down three things. What problem I was solving? What changed because I solved it? What decision did I have to make it? That's it. And don't try to worry about making it sound more impressive. Just make it accurate. For example, we are spending lot of time manually updating the dependencies. I created an automation that reduces the process from 2 hours to few minutes. I choose automation instead of documenting the manual process because this is something we would have to repeat it regularly. Look at how much information is in that little story. The problem, the result, and your judgment. That is much more useful than I created a PowerShell script. And keep doing it this because something interesting happens when you do this for a few months. You start seeing the patterns. You start to realize that you are repeatedly solving reliability problem. Maybe you are constantly helping other teams. Maybe you are becoming good at explaining the complex system. Maybe you are repeatedly automating the thing. Maybe you are making architectural decision more often. And suddenly you have evidence of how you are growing. You are not just saying I am becoming a better engineer. You can actually see it. And when you eventually have a conversation about your career, you have something much more stronger than I have worked really hard. You can say, here is the problem I have solved, here is what changed, here is what I have taken the ownership, and here is how my scope has grown. That is much better career conversation. One thing I don't want you to misunderstand. You don't have to become loud. You don't have to become someone who constantly speaks in the meeting. You don't have to promote yourself every 5 minutes. And you don't have to change your personality. If you are naturally quiet, that is okay. You can still be extremely influential. But there is a difference between being humble and hiding your contribution. You can say, team did this and I worked on this particular part. You can recognize the other people's contribution. You can give credit, and at the same time you can clearly communicate what contribution you have made. Those things can coexist. So maybe answer isn't work harder. If you are watching this and thinking, I'm already working very hard, but my career isn't moving anywhere, maybe don't immediately respond by working harder. Take a step back, look at the work you are already doing. Are you solving meaningful problems? Are you making the thing better? Are you preventing problems? Are you helping other people? Are you making good decisions? And the people who need to know understand the value you are creating, because your career isn't only built from the code you are creating, it is built from the problem you are solving, the decision you make, and eventually the reputation you have built around these things. So next time when you finish your work, don't just ask, what did I do? Ask, what changed because I did this? I think that one question can change the way you look at your work. And honestly, it is something which I am learning myself.